I think we're ready to begin. I'd like to take this time to introduce C.D. Breshears and tell a whole lot about him, which I won't. But I'm Angela Robinson, and many of you do know me. I work with the Idaho School Counselor Association. I'm also consultant for Stevens-Henniger College. And what I love about Stevens-Henniger, another reason I didn't take off my counselor hat, I just continued on after I retired, is because I just totally believe in CTE. I'm just adamant about that. My background primarily is counseling administration and all that. My favorites are the alternative high school kids. So CTE really becomes my passion. I have to tell you, C.D. Breshears, oh my goodness, when we met a year ago, this guy was incredible. Here's this young, handsome ex-Marine guy, and I'm thinking, what on earth am I doing with this punk kid when I come to him with all of this experience with education for 30 years? Well, I have to tell you, this punk kid that spends all his time like this, and I have to say, stop! I need help! Every once in a while, he just jumped on board with me, or both of us together, and to be perfectly honest and open, we totally have redone Stevens-Henniger College. I'm not here to plug the college, I'm here to plug CD, to tell you that he has learned what teachers, counselors are all about. I think you'll find a whole new respect. He said, boy, have my eyes been opened. CD has a fabulous marketing business mind that I love, paired with the education. We have just rocked the college to where now we're being asked to teach corporate. Yes, because when we came in, we said, it's about the kids. It is about education. It doesn't matter who's doing what. It matters about the kids having choices and knowing their options and knowing what's out there for them. So that's the way we approach the schools now. And we've just done marvelous. And all we've done is open up the world to say, hey, if you want to be a dental assistant, you need to go to Carrington. You want a 2-year degree? Go to this school and finish. And we have, or a 4-year degree or military or whatever. It's just been a marvelous pairing. CD is awesome at the PowerPoint, so I love to just let him do it all. And he is a fabulous presenter. So I just sit in the background and say, when the kids fill out the little cards, how did you do? He always wants to know, oh, I did great, you were entertained. I want to know, did you learn anything? So together, I hope you enjoy him today. I really love the presentation that he put together for you, and I think he's going to keep you excited and with good ideas. And sometimes I have to tell him, chill, these are educators. Shh. Okay, cheers.
All right, guys, I know that this is right after lunch, and we're kind of all got the food belly, the food baby, the food coma, however it is. So I will try to stay, not monotone, what's the opposite? Enthusiastic, all right? I'll try to stay motivating to keep you guys engaged. We're going to go a little bit into my background so you'll know why I always have to be moving and while I pace and why I talk really loud. But just kind of a disclaimer, I am not an educator. I have never been an educator. I don't have an education degree. I have a business degree. Like Angela was telling you before, I kind of jumped into this because I was recruiting for the military and was looking for that next step, and I thought, hey, admissions into a college, talking to kids about their future, that sounds awesome. So with that disclaimer, I want you guys to think a little bit back in your minds about one of your classrooms and some of your most challenging kids where you're like, that kid. Okay, I already know you have somebody in your mind right now. Okay, that was me. I was that kid. I wasn't necessarily a bad kid. I was just that kid. So the reason that Advanced Opportunities asked me to throw this together, and the reason I am so passionate about passion, is because I had to pull myself out of being that kid. And somewhere along the lines were some strategic people that came by and they're like, you know what? We're going to pull you out of this. In fact, I'm going to tell you first if my clicker will work, and it will not. I'll just do this. When I was little CD, so this is before Marine CD, before public speaker CD, I was a public speaker in class. single report card that was sent home to my parents, regardless of my grades, which I was like a B-ish on the edge of a C student, was, guess what?
Talk so much.
Disruptive in class. Yes, that's the word, disruptive. I was disruptive in class. I talked too much. Now, believe it or not, I was kind of an unconfident sort. So I think I was doing it mostly for attention and mostly for I just could not sit still. School is like the absolute worst environment. And if you've watched me throughout this conference, I'm kind of hard to miss. I get up a lot, I move around a lot. I'll stand in the back of the room, stand in the front, because I'm still that 8-year-old little boy inside that can't sit still. So even though I wasn't a bad kid, my mom was constantly being told, and I was constantly being reminded that I was disruptive in class. Do you think that kind of set a mentality for me for the rest of my schooling as I approach my junior high and senior high, that I'm just disruptive in class? So, that being said, come to my, do you guys remember the writing assessment test? They don't still do that anymore, right? How many of you guys remember that? So in my junior year, I was actually sick. That was when everybody had to take the writing assessment test. I actually took it when I was a senior. And I had this ancient at the time. So this is like 1997. So I'm sure he's long gone and won't care that I'm talking about him. I had an English teacher tell me that I would never make it in college. And the reason he said that, I think, is because he would turn us loose with an assignment. He'd give us a book. And he'd say, read this, do this essay, answer these questions, and then he would let the class kind of work. Now, if you're a studious person, that's your dream scenario. Homework in class time, right? If you're somebody like me, and you're surrounded by all of your friends, what are you doing after school, right? Okay, so that was me, and even to this day, I find it very, very difficult to sit down and read. I don't. I actually don't. I have a one-page email, and you've lost me at Dear CD. I'll have to have somebody read it to me. But these words, these were very damaging to me, because I never thought I was academically special, right? I'm getting C's and B's maybe. I'm never doing homework. I'm always talking in class. But these were very damaging to me because I always thought I would go to college. I always just assumed that was the next step. Now, right or wrong, I don't know if we're still teaching kids that, but I knew I wanted a bachelor's degree. I saw what my dad was doing and what my mom was doing. My mom had 2 bachelors and working on a teaching certificate, and my dad was a high school dropout in 9th grade. Probably made 3 times what my mom did, but I knew I wanted to go the college route, so this, to me, was poisonous. And I remember let's go back to that writing assessment test now. I took it, I was pulled out of class because it was mandatory. If you didn't take it one year, you had to take it the next. And I wrote in my writing assessment test, and how many of you guys, if you don't know the way a sentence should be structured, or you don't know how to spell a single word, you will restructure the entire sentence to make it right. I wasn't smart, but I was smart enough. Okay, so when I'm doing my writing assessment, if I didn't know something was perfect grammar or perfect English, or I wanted to use the word anti-disestablishmentarianism and I didn't know how to spell it, I would switch it around. Well, a couple weeks later we get the results, and I was one of the very few people in my school to score perfect. Now this is from a B and C student, and to this day I still do not read with my eyes. I do not read books. Okay? So I take that little, they used to print it off, you remember the printers where you had to tear off the sides, right? So somebody had printed off all the scores and then took in the shears and cut each little line out. So I have my name, and then across the way I have, I think a perfect score was a 5 at the time, a 5 out of 5. And I went in to Mr. So-and-so's, right? I still remember his name, and his face burned into me. I'll just call him Mr. Gollum. And I remember walking into that classroom and setting that down on his desk and just walking off. That was the only time, out of all the times, in elementary school, my name, I went by Christopher back then. Okay, so this was before my CD days. My name was written on the chalkboard, and you know that was bad, right? You were on the teacher's radar. And if you got a check mark, that was like 5 minutes from recess. 2 check marks, no recess. 3 check marks, letter home. 4, where are you going? Principals. I'd been to the principal's office so many times. This was the first time when he told me this that I took a teacher to the principal's office. Anybody ever have students that do that? Kind of innovative, right? But it hurt me so bad, and it cut me to this day. I still remember, and I don't remember hardly anything from high school. Kind of goes to my personality, right? But I remember this because when I slammed that perfect score down on his desk and walked out, I felt like I'd overcome his words. And when we had the lunch speaker yesterday, you guys all hear him when he was like, sometimes teachers and counselors will use poison as leverage. To somebody that's been told their whole life they're disruptive in class, what do you think more poison does? Okay, so at 17, 18 years old, I took my 2.8 GPA and my diploma because I thought you had to get through school. I didn't even know dropping out was a thing. I thought you had to go. So I took my 2.8 and I started throwing mud. Okay, you guys know what mud is? Concrete. It only took me 9 months of concrete work to go, oh, I never want to do this again. Okay? So a year and a half after a year and a half after I graduated from Valley View High School, whoop, whoop. By the way, the first school to ramp in Idaho, okay? I graduated a year and a half later. I start my first semester at Boise State. It's the year 2000. Everything is rainbows and puppies, right? Okay, and I'm going back to school. Took a full course load, 17 credits, got a 3.77. Right? Okay, so that's the first time I'm like, hey, I'm really not stupid. Because the writing assessment, I just figured I stuck it to them, you know, like, well, I don't have to use the word anti-disestablishmentarianism if I don't want to. I'll use something simple, something with 4 letters. But it didn't take long for me to go, boy, this is a lot of classes. In fact, I was bouncing back and forth. I took B100 because I was like, hey, biology sounds awesome. It's a general course. Took notes like a madman, got a B, was really proud. Before I talked to somebody at my school and they go, well, if to do what you want to do, which was pre-med, everyone wants pre-med, right? You got to have B101 and 102. So now we're taking that 100 level class and we're going to squeeze a year into it. So that's the first time I realized, man, I got a lot of these general education courses to get out of the way. Now, when I talk to high schoolers, and in case you can't tell, I engage high schoolers more than anyone else, so I'm really kind of nervous and quite humbled to be in front of you today. In fact, let me grab a drink. But when I talk to the high schoolers, we all know that we have tons of reasons to drop out, right? There are millions of excuses, reasons. Some of them are really good. I always tell the kids that any reason to drop out is actually a reason to stay in. Yes? I got pregnant. Okay, so now that a baby's on the way, don't you think you should make a little bit more money than less money? But I used the best excuse in the world to drop out. What do you think happened when I was in school? In 2001, I woke up on a Tuesday morning and rolled out of bed to what? Oh boy, that's a good excuse to drop out of school. And I did, after 2 years. So I dropped out of school, joined the Marine Corps at age 23. I was working out at Roaring Springs as an EMT in the summer and shipped out actually in 2003 because I had one of my cousins come back and he was all dressed in his blues. Man, blues. Right? Okay, so we dropped out, joined the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps taught me a lot of stuff. But for the first time in my life, it gave me what I saw as purpose. Okay, so if you go back in my career, I spent all of my youth serving in my church. Okay, like serious volunteer hours at my church. And then I went into lifeguarding, and then I was an EMT, and then I enlisted. Is there a pattern to just my natural, normal, spastic behavior? I'm starting to shift into what Angela will nicely call a career cluster. Have we heard of those? Okay, but nobody had educated me on that, so I'm just like spinning my wheels, but the Marines gave me some leadership abilities. They actually taught me some stuff that I was like, wow, I can do this with a group of young men. I can do this. I can lead people. I can lead people that were above me. This was the first time that people who outranked me, I was in charge of. Do you think anyone in my high school ever gave me a leadership opportunity? No, because I was that kid. Nobody gives that kid responsibility, right? That's a gamble. So here I am. I get out of the Marine Corps. I cannot wait to get back to Boise State. In fact, when things were really tough in the Marines, I thought of the blue turf. I thought, I cannot wait to get back. Have you ever been so cold and so sweaty that your sweat has sealed your eyes shut? It's a rowdy feeling. So it's probably 2 in the morning. Me and my platoon, we've been walking all night long. If you've ever worn a flak jacket, it keeps everything inside as far as heat. You can go like this, and if you wear glasses, you got to take them off now because all that heat was sealed in. Well, we stopped for a security haul in the middle of the night, and I remember being, you sit down and you don't want to drop your pack because you never know when you're going to have to get back up, thinking, all of a sudden my eyes, like, what is that? And I reached up, and sure enough, the sides of my eyes had frozen shut. And there was sweat that had been dripping down the side of my face that was now icicles hanging off my face.
Oh my goodness.
So if you ever want to know a guy who was grateful for the blue turf, it's this guy. Because guess what I did immediately after my service in the Marine Corps? I went back to Boise State. I had a couple of professors that were amazing. Christy Succi was one of them. I actually, with her help, got a veterans scholarship for about $5,500. That was awesome. But it wasn't until I was 29 that somebody asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And when I say somebody, who do you think I mean? Somebody that I think can pull that out of me, right? And at this point, here's my human resource teacher. Now, my human resource teacher, Dr. Bodie, who is awesome, taught one of the most boring subjects I'd ever been to, which is like what? Business law, HR, stuff that I was like, but she was so awesome and so invested in me. So this was the first time that I sat down in an office with somebody that I looked up to who asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And just so you guys know, when I sit down with a 16, 17, 15, 29, I ask that same question. If I had a magic wand and time and money weren't a thing, what are you doing with your life? Because when we remove time and money, that's an obstacle, right? And when we can see the light at the end of the tunnel and somebody takes all those obstacles out of the way, we're like, hey. So I told her, well, what I like to do in the Marines, I like to build teams. I like to take a bunch of people from diverse backgrounds, put them together, put them in a room, and get the absolute most gold out that you can possibly mine out of that team. That's because that's what I did in the Marines. And she goes, you need to do HR. And I laughed. Because I thought it was all business law and compensation packages and payroll. I didn't want to do any of that. Sorry, I make a lot of poop noises. Should have been a disclaimer up front before y'all sat down. But that's when she sat down and she goes, "CD, what do you want to do?" So I told her that, and she goes, "You need to do HR." And I believed her. I bought it. Despite what I thought about human resources, I bought it. She was in a position in my life where I was looking, going, "Yeah." That's where I needed to head. It added 1.5 years to my already 11-year program at Boise State. Okay, so when you guys are like, 5.5 is the average, I'm like, twice that for me, right? Because when you quit going, time still ticks, right? And when you're dropping out, when we try to get these kids to go right into college, there's a reason, because that clock starts ticking and life starts happening fast. And the sooner we can get them in and out, we know the more successful they're going to be in the earlier on. But to me, that was 29 years old. I'm like, okay, another year and a half, so let's do this. And I'm really glad I did. But when I got out of Boise State, something scary happened that I didn't anticipate. What do you think that was?
You got struck by lightning.
Yes. No. I already felt like Billy Madison, right? When you're a veteran and you go back to a traditional school, Boise State's kind of teetering on traditional, non-traditional, but you go back to class, you feel like you're surrounded by children. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Ever take a class with? Yeah. So there's a fear that happens when you graduate from college that nobody really tells you about, and that's employment. Because especially now in today's age where school loans are being heavily demonized and everyone's going school should be free, I knew, because I paid on my student loans all through the Marine Corps, right, that my student loans were coming for me. So I took the first job that came along that was good pay, and it was security. Because when we're scared, what do? We go right back to what we know we're good at. And I was good at carrying a gun. So I went back to do security, and I did it for Gowan Field. Now luckily, Gowan Field's a huge operation. There's like 147 guard bases worldwide. Gowan is one of like the 5th largest, in case you didn't know. Okay. So that was pretty sweet. So I started perusing the website and got a job in recruiting, which recruiting is a facet of what? HR. So for the first time in my life, I have stepped into my career field. Woo! 32. Okay, did I do things the right way, the wrong way? I always tell people there's a right way to go to school and there's a wrong way. And the wrong way is dropping out, going back, dropping out, going back, transferring from one school to another school to another school. There's always a wrong way to do something. And there's a right way to do something. That's what I love about advanced opportunities. Because they're like mapping out the absolute best ways that you can do stuff. The cheapest, quickest, fastest way in. So then when I sit down and talk to a 17-year-old, I'm like, hey, 32 years old. So I've only been in my career field for a half a year. No, I wish I was still 32. But I put this. Because it wasn't just a career field for me. When I started talking to kids about going and serving, I knew what they were getting into, right? When I talked to little Susie or little Johnny, I know what they're about to step into, the world they're about to face. So when Mama of Susie comes in and goes, why are you trying to recruit my daughter into the military? I can address that fear with expertise, right? Because I've seen it. And I liked being able to do that. I liked being able to say, you know, I know that graduating high school is scary, but that next step is going right in the military where they're going to take care of everything for you. That's a good feeling. I wish I had joined right out of high school instead of 23. Believe it or not, 23 in infantry is an old man. An old man. I had little 21-year-old turds telling me what to do because they were my boss. That's just the way it was. So we're going to shift focus a little bit, and I got this. Ooh, everybody go. Ooh. I have props. How many of you guys have ever tried to start a fire without one of these? Without a match.
I was going to say match.
Without some sort of ignition. Yeah, I got you, bro. I got you. Without an ignition source. Who has tried to start a fire without an ignition source? How fun is that?
Sucks.
If you're going to do that in the wild, how long does it take from the time you start to try to make a fire to the time you get flame? Hours. If you're, yeah, it's usually hours. These guys that do it on TV, hours. Okay? Rubbing sticks, the bow method, the friction method all takes time.
And sometimes you don't even start.
And sometimes, especially if you're living in a humid climate, or wet, or in the Arctic, good luck, right? So I brought this today because, for one, you guys will remember that dude with the lighter. I wish I had a nice, cool Zippo that I could do tricks with. But if you've never, by the way, this is one of my absolute heroes. If I could sit down and have a meal with somebody, well, it'd probably be Jesus. But next would be Bear Grylls. It's tough to start a fire without one of these, okay? So I'm going to actually give you a little bit of elementary. So we're going to go back to when I was disruptive in class, because now I'm at the top of the class, right? I'm at the head. Okay, you guys are all eyes are on me. We're going to talk about the fire triangle. Who remembers that? Got to have all three to have fire, right? And when you're out in the woods, you might have two. Plenty of oxygen in the woods, plenty of fuel in the woods, but what does that take so long to start a fire? So you're missing something, right? You're missing that ignition source or heat. There's tons of ways to make heat. Friction is one of the most common ones. If you've never made fire, what's the first thing that you need to do when thinking, I think I'm going to make a fire? Anybody? Any survivalists in here?
Fuel.
What do you need to gather first? Fuel, right? And it's got to be good fuel. You can't just be going and getting branches off the ground that might be wet. You got to find the good stuff. Old man's beard, you pull off the trees, okay? Coconut husks, all that stuff, tinder bundles. Prep time, okay? But that's the fuel that you need. Now I'm going to blow your minds, and I want you to think back to 8-year-old CD who was disruptive in class, and I want you to picture the fuel that's inside me. Because as I said, I can go clear back to as far back as I can remember, and I was aiming for something called a career cluster. I was also being constantly told that I was disruptive in class. What do you think that did to my fuel?
Suppressed.
Got it wet?
Heated it up.
Maybe heated it up? No, that's rage, lady. That's a whole different PowerPoint that I can send you that one later. What I believe is that even that kid has a fuel bundle. Okay? Even that kid has something that's happened in their lives or that's happening in their lives. Now, as I went through my life, I went around collecting little things from my fuel bundle so that when that teacher said, CD, what do you want to do with your life? For the first time, it lit. And since it has lit, I'll tell you, I have been like a train in my career. I'm doing things that are crazy that I never thought I'd ever do before. 1 year ago today-ish, I was so happy to speak for 5 minutes at the counseling conference. I was like, oh my gosh, this is big time. I'm giving this presentation next time. Okay, so in 1 year, that was the first time somebody went, because so many times people had come by and, you're never going to make it in college. Okay, now I got a wet tinder bundle. What do you got to do when your fuel gets wet? Got to dry it out. Let's take oxygen. Oxygen is what surrounds the fire. It's what keeps it burning hot. Okay, when you cap a candle, what happens? It suffocates, right? And if you suffocate a fire, it goes out. This oxygen is our surroundings. Okay, and for me, that teacher, Mr. Gollum, was part of my surroundings. You guys are part of the surroundings of your kids, but guess what? So are the bullies. So is the classmate next to them. And you never know who's splashing their tinder bundle. You never know when they go home who's pooping in their nest. I use that one all the time. It's graphic, you'll remember. You never know who's tampering with that kid's fuel bundle. Okay? Unless you really start to dig. And sometimes you'll sniff a parent and you're like, oh, that kid. Right? Now I had great parents, so this was all me. I can't blame my folks. They loved me, they worked hard for me. I can't say, oh, my parents. But I can go back and tell you that a teacher tried to put me out. I can tell you that disruptive in class on every report card I ever had in elementary school. In fact, my mom still has a calendar that she laid out with those little cheap gold stars. And if I got 1 month of gold stars, she was going to take me to Disneyland. She still has that chart because I got all gold stars, and then my dad was laid off. It's okay, you can say, oh, that sucks, right? But she still has that chart because she was trying to breathe life into me because all I was hearing is how disruptive in class I was and how many trips to the principal's office CD's gonna take this month. Okay? Now that heat source, who had my heat source? Dr. Bodie, the Marines. Okay? But so do you. When I sit down with a kid and I'm talking to them about their hopes and dreams, I can tell if I've lit something. Anyone else? You see it, you can't hide it. When that bundle takes a spark, you know it. And you just want to be like, right? Because that's a really dangerous time where you're like, it's burning. And that took a lot of time and work, but it's so sensitive. Okay? It's so sensitive. And not every student is your Steve Jobs. Once Steve Jobs' fire was lit, the world couldn't put it out. He was removed from his own company that he built, that he made successful. They still couldn't put it out. Walt Disney is another one. He was denied by every bank in California to build Disneyland, the happiest place on earth. He was told no. There are just certain people that once it sparks, it's going to go. But then there's other people like me where you're like, okay, and it needs a little bit of nurturing because the oxygen's been sucked out at some point in their lives or their tinder bundle's wet. And if either of these two aren't adding up, do you have fire? You've got zip. You got a cold freezing night in the dirt. Congratulations. Okay? So I want to tell you that all of you guys are toting one of these. And sometimes when you sit and talk to a kid, you're not that Dr. Bodie. You're not that person that's going to spark that fire. But what you can do is you can just sit there and hold that flame. Because if somebody would have told 8-year-old CD, hey, buddy, you talk a lot. Did you know that there are people that just talk for a living? Hey, CD talks a lot in class, and yeah, it's disruptive because we got to teach everybody the same stuff. But did you know that there are people that all they do all day is bump their gums? Guess where else I saw that? Boot camp. Except it was more like this. But those guys just yelled all day long, but they were paid really good money to just sit there and berate me all day. And when it was quiet, that's when you knew things were bad. One time I snuck off into the bathroom, I had to go, and I snuck out, and I'm like, okay. And as I walk out, my drill instructor was standing there like the Marlboro Man, with his head down, and I just knew the storm was coming. Okay, but nobody sat little 8-year-old CD down and said, hey, you're not stupid. You just talk a lot. You're going to have a hard time in standardized education. You're going to have a hard time sitting and reading a textbook. But guess what God has given man since I was a little kid? I now read at least one book a week. Audible.com. Oh man, God's gift to people like me, because I was stuck in traffic for an hour and a half this morning. Can anyone feel me? Anyone drove from Nampa this morning? And yet, my book was playing the whole time. And I'm sitting there going, man, this ain't too bad. In fact, I just plowed through Lord of the Rings. It was my first break from nonfiction in like 2 years, because all I ever read now is business, marketing, self-help, motivation, how to give a presentation, how to do this, how to better yourself. I'm also in an MBA program, so I'm listening to my textbooks because God help me, I have never cracked open a textbook with the purpose of reading it. What good would that do somebody like me? Because even if I do read that first line, it's never going to stick. And I'm going to have to go back, what did I just read? Anyone with me?
Yeah.
And yet, this is how we treat almost every kid because we're required to say, read chapters 1 through 3, there's going to be questions at the end, blah, 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 blah. In fact, iTunes is onto that now, and they're like, hey, we're going to make ebooks where you just click on it and it will read it to you. We're learning. So now, I'm like, okay, so I gave a few presentations in the military, but nothing like what I'm doing now. So when I go into a classroom, I tell them this story. Because sometimes those kids feel made stupid by standardized education. And if you ask them, do you think your GPA is a reflection of how intelligent you are, there will be maybe 20% of the room that will raise their hand, and those are your smarty pantses. Okay? Those are your 3.8, 4.0 students. Which, guess what? Their flame, it's burning. They love academics. They love reading. They love writing. You know that you can cut them loose to go to college and they're going to be great. And then there's that kid. You're just like, ugh. And it's getting worse, right, millennials? Congratulations, that's me. I'm on the tail end. So I'm not Gen X millennial hybrid that believes in hard work, but I'm also a spaz. But that's okay. Because eventually somebody sat down with me at 29 years old and was like, and just heated that up just enough that it started to take. And the more I got into HR, do you guys think graduating after 11 years was kind of a bump in the right direction? And then when I got my job as a recruiter, because I was in security, and if you've never done security, this is what it was like. Sitting out in the middle of the night, watching the airplanes, watching Game of Thrones. Watching airplanes, watching Seinfeld. That's what a college graduate was doing. Because it was a good paying job. So it was lucky that I worked at a big organization that allowed me some upward mobility. I surrounded myself with something else I needed to breathe fire into my career. And once I got that job recruiting and started giving presentations and started investing into kids and started serving, now I'm unstoppable. Okay? If I found out tomorrow I was laid off, I'd be like, all right, what's next? I know where I'm heading. Okay? And I know that I'm valuable to the marketplace because I have a gift. I can bump my gums. And I can get people to laugh. And I can get people to go, hey, yeah. So why did Advanced Opportunities ask me to talk about passion? Because I'm that kid. Sometimes it's okay to be that kid. Who started a fire with this? Depending on the magnifying glass, it can be quick. It can take time. I watched Mythbusters. They polished a can of Coke for an hour with chocolate before it was shiny enough to start a fire. An hour of buffing the bottom of a can of Coke. But if you've got a magnifying glass, that sunlight gets intense quick. Okay? Now, in education, sometimes you guys are teachers, sometimes you're counselors. You're always in a mentorship role, but to a millennial, you're not always a mentor. Sometimes mom and dad aren't mentors. You're not seen by that student as somebody that knows them. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know my story. Can we relate? Earphones in, don't even talk to me. Tupac knows me better than you. He speaks right to my soul from the grave. So your job, when you're talking to students about their passions, sometimes you're going to be doing this, right? Holding that flame, hoping to either dry out, surround them with motivation, giving them opportunities. You think Advanced Opportunities, CWI, Boise State are all part of the oxygen that can breathe life into somebody's passion. We know that education breathes life. And we know that millennials want to learn. Because if they want to learn something, they will spend hours on YouTube learning it. Right? So we know it's not because they don't want to learn or they're lazy. Because when they care, it's over. They're gone. But this isn't always you. It's not always you. If that student sees you as a teacher or a parent, you're just another voice. You might be saying all the right things. And you might be holding that flame and breathing as much oxygen, and you still won't be that to that student. Because my mom always told me, you can be whatever you want. Even my dad said that. He said I could be a football player. I was this tall, 150 when I graduated high school. Do you think that a football player? One wrong move, and oh, I'll never be the same. So your job is to find this for that student. Because when you can focus that heat source, what happens? And I'm going to tell you guys something that's going to really hurt the career counselors in the room. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I took a personality test that says I will offend 20% of everyone I meet. So, the other 80% will like me. So that's a pretty good give and take. Career counselors. Counselors, teachers, if you sit down with little Susie and little Susie wants to be a teacher, you're one of the best people she can talk to. You walked that path. You went to such and such university. You make a certain amount of money. You work a certain amount of hours. You can sit down with Susie and go, you know what, Susie? I'll tell you everything you want to know about being a teacher. Now that is not your chance to go, oh, teachers don't make crap. Because we know we don't do it for the money. That was one thing I had a hard time as a business person stepping into the education world. Because I just don't get it. I'm like, man, you guys are worth so much more than what you make. And I get the same response every time. I don't do it for the money. So as a parent, that means the world to me, because that's how my mom teaches. Okay, so I got Angela in the back, I got a mentor in the counselor's arena, I got my mom to look up to, so now I get it. But when little Susie comes up to you, you don't want to say, well, my principal sucks. Principals are the stupidest. That's not your time to put the Tinder bundle out. That's your time now to step into this role right here. Instead of the Mr. Gollum who splashed my dreams, right? You can't ever make it in college. Now, as a counselor, if Johnny comes up to you and goes, talk to a Marine recruiter. You're like, Johnny, Marines are dying overseas. Your parents are never going to let you join. What are you doing to little Johnny's hopes and dreams? Just like that. Because it's your advice, and you're not this. To Johnny, you know who was this? That recruiter. As a recruiter, I get kind of a bad stigma. Because I'm like selling these kids. And I do believe 100% that kids are an easy mark. I believe that I could go to a high school in the Arctic and sell 17-year-olds refrigerators. But if you know me, you know that that ain't my game. This is my game. And there are a lot of people out there that that's their game. Okay? Because this is where they want to be. And little Johnny may have never entertained the idea of being a Marine, but all that has to happen is an attack on U.S. soil, and what happened to me? I'm still like the nicest, most docile peacemaker. What was I ever doing in the Marine Corps? People are like, you're not even the typical Marine. I'm like, no, I played the part and then I got out. And that is as true as I can be. I have friends that are still, they wear that coat every day to work, everywhere they go. Me, I'm like, that was a different life. I'm the peacemaker. I'm the, hey guys, everything's okay. You know, we don't need to drop any bombs. Okay? But that recruiter now is that mentor, that magnifier. And it's your job to make sure little Johnny talks to as many of these as possible, because that is what's going to keep little Johnny going when he goes to boot camp. Everybody's kicking him down. That's what's going to keep little Susie going through the 4-year university. Well, I don't really want to be a teacher. That's the way to go. Graduate school. If you want to be a counselor, welcome to graduate school. Welcome to having your master's. You want to make more money in Idaho's education system, welcome to your master's. Okay? That's when you're the best person to talk to that. But if you're giving little Johnny advice about the military and you never served, I have a saying when I walk into my classrooms. Well, not that. I'll give it to you right after this slide. Sorry, I forgot my order. I take this into every single school because that kid and those kids are working on their story, right? It's a piece of their future. And when I was gabbing in class, what was I working on? My story. What was going to make me impactful? How by the time I'm 36 years old, can I jump into a room full of educators and teach them something? I was starting my story. And every kid's story is going to be different. Even if they're from that typical cookie cutter home. Some of you guys work with academy schools. Those kids are writing their story fast. Okay, you're underprivileged. They're writing their stories fast. The next, that which you love. So many of us sit down and try to get kids to just pursue what they love. Right? That advice, go find something you really love, really believe in, put your whole heart and soul into it. I think that's great advice, except, what do you think I loved when I was 17? Somebody said it. Yeah, what almost every guy loves when they're 17. Girls, playing guitar, and video games. I promise, if I would have gone into any of those career fields, things would have been bad. Wouldn't have worked out for me. Next is your profession or things that you're naturally good at. At 8 years old, what was I good at? Talking. Okay, I was nervous in my speech class. In fact, if you guys saw me before class, I was like, you could see my pulse through my neck. I still get nervous. Okay, but I was working on something that I was going to eventually really get good at. I still play guitar, by the way. Just not well. You wouldn't pay me to play guitar. In your vocation or that which you can be paid for. Nobody said, CD, you can get paid to talk all day. In fact, customer service reps do that all the time. You ever call DirecTV because your Sunday ticket went out? Boy, you're expecting somebody on the phone fast, and they better talk and type fast. And then that which the world needs. The world's got to have, or got to need, what you have to offer. So I'll tell kids, does the world need guitarists? Yes. Will they pay you to be a guitarist? Coffee shops, right? Maybe. If you play with your case open on the side of a busy street, maybe. But if we're only focusing on this small piece of the puzzle, we're missing a giant portion. Because some people at age 16 could go around the world and get paid millions for telling their story already at 16 years old. In fact, we just saw an example of it 2 hours ago when a young lady came up and started telling her story to us. That is awesome. But we got to capture the whole picture. We've got to be showing kids everything. What makes you you? What do you naturally have an aptitude for? What do you love to do? Because chances are that kid does something better than every other kid in that class. Or that young lady does something better than any, and I'll step aside because I can see somebody's taking a picture. But when you put all those together, that is where you're going to find your purpose. And for me, it wasn't until the Marine Corps. To one of my instructors at the School of Infantry, I was now in charge of, I was an E4 corporal, in charge of an E6 staff sergeant who used to be in charge of me at school, and he was now my subordinate. That was a cool feeling for me. Okay? It was purpose. It was putting me in a situation of people were watching me, people were looking up to me. So that slide, let's go back to when I was going to say, hey, wait, that's next slide. I will tell all of my kids this. If you want friendly advice, don't ever take friendly advice. Powerful words. But I always couple it with this. Only ever take advice from somebody you would what? Switch places with. So for instance, if you're sitting down with a financial planner, they better be making the money and doing with it what you want to be doing with your money. Right? Does that make sense? If you want to join the Marine Corps, what are you doing talking to your buddies? Or even your parents, if they've never served? Who do you need to be talking to? Yeah, right? Okay, so only ever take advice from somebody that switched places with. That is where you guys come in, because you have the ability to go, well, I know so-and-so from here, and I know so-and-so from here. You need to be talking to little Susie, because she's chomping at the bit to be an educator. And I want her to go in with her eyes wide open. And I want to be like this, so when that magnifier comes in, little Susie light the world on fire. Because that's one thing I've seen my mom do. She wasn't a teacher. She actually started a business teaching homeschool kids music. Then she got cancer while I was in boot camp. Found that out. Ouch. Okay? When I got out of the Marine Corps, she was in the school district because she needed what? Insurance. Working 30 hours a week. Getting paid for 30 hours a week, working 90 hours a week. Because where's her heart? It's with those students. I watched that fire burn. Okay, so I had that. So I'm always going to put somebody like that in front of little Susie who wants to be an educator. I'm going to put somebody that knows the military, that knows CTE, somebody that's a public speaker. Little Johnny talks way too much. I need to hook him up with CD because CD talks too much. And I know what it's like. So I'll go in and I'll talk about the 5 basic choices. We've kind of hit on a lot of them. You know, kids don't know the truth about this one or which one? This one. Those are the 2 I see with the most this. Did you know that a kid is 90% likely to join the branch of the first recruiter that gets their hooks in them? Because it's easy to sell the military. It's easy to sell the kid, it's patriotic. You put on that uniform, right? And when I used to be a military recruiter, and I'd wear my uniform into your schools, I was welcome like this. Ooh. I put on my Steven Senator shirt, and I come in, and it's like, whoosh. Whoa, private education, right? But that military aspect, that's a big one, and that's where I think recruiters should be led. Because when it comes to taking that next 4 years of that kid's life, and by the way, you can't drop out of the military. So that kid better be sure that that's what they want to do. In the workforce, we all want to go straight in the workforce and make money, but we all know that that's really not the case. We know the statistics for return kids. And I don't know how I busted all the statistics because I took a 1.5 years off. I went back to Boise State, I dropped out, I joined the Marine Corps, I bounced everywhere. I did everything wrong, and if you look at Idaho's statistics, you'd be like, CD doesn't even fit anywhere on this map, but guess what? I was born in Colorado, I graduated from Valley View, went to Boise State. Okay, so there are statistic breakers, but we know we need to educate on the workforce. We need to show the kids that you can get into a career fast and have that be okay. Because right now, and I think we're seeing a shift in Idaho away from everyone's got to go on to college. Now we're like, everyone's got to go on to some sort of post-secondary education, and it needs to be great for all of us, right? So you got a choice. You can either be the, with your advice, no matter how well-intentioned it is, or you can set little Johnny in front of that magnifier, and once he lights, he'll be unstoppable. And hopefully it's at 21, 22, before your body starts to break down like mine has. And you get infantry ankles, and everything cracks when you get out of bed in the morning. But your job description, whether you're playing the mentor, the magnifier, anything else, you just want to hold that flame. Because you don't know the oxygen that he goes home to, that she goes home to. You don't know how much fuel there is inside, but I promise you, even that kid has a fuel source. And the sooner we can get it lit, the more successful they're going to be. So